All right. Hello there. My name is Brian Geary. I'm Communications Director at Pearson, and I'm coming to you today from the unceded territory of the Chicano First Nation. In other words, I'm on campus today. And I'm happy to welcome our guest today, Lyndsay Sprado, who is the Executive Director of the National Committee of Canada for UWC. And Lyndsay kindly consented to going through a bit of a rapid fire 10 questions or so that everyone out there can put a face to the name and then we can introduce ourselves. I will say one thing, in total fairness to you, Lyndsay, you've only been on the job for a couple of weeks, so our expectations are moderated, of course, so welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here and also to be joining you from this beautiful campus. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself then.
Okay, where to start? I am originally from a small town in northern Alberta called Peace River. So I grew up in a small northern rural community. I often think about what I would have done at 15 if I had known about UWC. And I'm really not sure if I would have been brave enough to have applied back then. I was heavily involved in sports, playing hockey and swimming, and really grateful for my upbringing in a small town like that. But my gosh, as I encountered the rest of the world, I learned so much more. So I'm a small town kid at heart. I attended the University of Alberta Augustana campus, and I applied to university when I was 17. So I feel very much like I understand still what students go through when they're applying to schools like UWC and university, and just found like my whole world really changed once I got out of where I was from. I got to do this very cool exchange in my second year of university. It was called the RDX. It was a rural development exchange, and it actually is where I first encountered UWC. My supervisor at the time was a Pearson alum. I'll give her a shout out. Her name is Erica Mundell. I think year 25 maybe, but about the same age and just so much more worldly and aware to education and learning and how communities work. So I got to spend a year with her, and I learned so much more about how to think critically, which was really, really hard. It really pushed me outside my comfort zone, but it changed my whole trajectory in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. So I'm very, very grateful that I went to a small campus like that, and I got to meet an incredible person like her that sort of got me on my journey. I will be kind of geeky and say I also, as a kid, always wanted to be repping Team Canada. And so having this title and being able to work for the National Committee of Canada for UWC is very much like a dream come true, especially in this area.
We invite and embrace a little bit of geekiness in this role. So thank you. So you've almost answered the second question, and that's what brought you to the National Committee of Canada. Being the only staff person, the only hired staff person. Yeah. We know the NCC is powered by volunteers, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So what brought you to this role?
Yeah, I think it's honestly been a culmination of my educational background, really wanting to learn about development and how communities function, not only in Canada, around the world, but I feel like this role allows me to bring in a lot of that experience of volunteer management and really seeking out community stakeholders and working with them. So the 19-year-old Lyndsay that I think about is very happy that I'm in this role now. And my experience, I think in education has really taught me that I need to be very passionate about what I'm talking about. I need to really believe in the educational systems that I'm working for and working within. And that is a place that sort of I've found within UWC for me. I'm very values oriented, and I feel like I really want to make sure that everything I'm doing is good for the world and good for others. And this is a role that certainly allows me to do that.
certainly sounds like you've made the right decision. You're in the right spot. Um, so what is the role of the executive director of the NCC anyway? It sounds like it could be very broad, and it obviously involves working quite a bit with volunteers on the national committee and various provincial and territorial committees, and talking to prospective students and their families too, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, I would say that there's a lot of fun stuff, which really involves students and their parents, and talking about the 18 schools that we have around the world and how the UWC sort of community functions. And then there's also a lot of work related stuff that people might not describe as fun, but I'm learning that there's a lot of board governance work. I feel like it's kind of a misnomer to be the sole employee, because I'm really not. We have volunteers that work for the national committee like it's a full-time job. I'm just lucky that I get paid to do this with my full-time efforts. So yeah, I'm learning a lot of legal jargon and how to basically run a nonprofit organization. And I get to sort of monitor and support the recruitment, selections, nominations of Canadian students to all of the 18 schools across the movement. I work for all of the schools. And so while I work out of Pearson right now, I'm slightly independent of every school in that way, that I'm working for the organization of UWC with the same goals that obviously Pearson has, as does UWC USA and Atlantic College and ISAC. Sorry, there's a little outside noise that you're getting. But yeah, I get to do a lot of that, and I get to take on a new challenge, which I think is really important, which is fundraising. National committees around the world have really started to step up to fundraise towards scholarships and supporting students through, a lot of the added fees that come at them, so that really we want to make sure that the financial backgrounds of students is not something that's holding them back from being able to go to a UWC. So I think it's super important to start addressing that and working with our alumni and our volunteers to do more.
Speaking of volunteers, have you had a chance to meet many volunteers for the National Committee face-to-face, or has it all been on screen like we're talking today?
Yeah, well, luckily I've already had a life within UWC, and so I have been lucky to meet a heck of a lot of our volunteers around Canada. I volunteered alongside them in a lot of different UWC capacities, but we just have some amazing alumni that are working for our national committee. I think it's really the most unique thing that has made UWC so successful is how passionate and connected alumni are to wanting to give other opportunities that they had. So I feel like I get to work with some of the very best people. And I'll also be honest, I thought when I applied for my first job with UWC, because I wasn't an alum, I was never going to be considered. And I would just say to everyone out there that it's such an open and welcoming community to anyone who thinks that the world could be better, that you don't need to be an alum to want to be involved. If you care about the world and education, it's a really great organization to get involved in.
I think that's a really important point to make, and thank you for making it. That we have so many people here who are passionate about the UWC movement and passionate about their individual UWC schools, and they're not all alumni. They're not all graduates of the schools or the system. So that's great. Thank you. And I'll just, as a little bit of an aside, I know that anyone watching this is going to be thinking, oh, Lyndsay, you're freezing out there. Your image is just frozen for a couple of seconds, but we're trying to make sure that we don't miss anything. And, let's face it. I mean, look at Lyndsay and look where she is. She's on the Pearson campus. Hopefully the people who see that and are familiar with Pearson are going to say, yeah, that's what I love about that place. So it's early days yet, but what are your ambitions for the National Committee? I mean, have you been able to define those? I know it's always a matter of like sitting, listening, and learning about what people need and what volunteers who have had a number of years of experience with this. But what are you looking at as your ambitions for the National Committee?
Yeah. Well, number one, I will say that I have extremely big shoes to fill. I got to work with both Nina Moroso and Luisa Vazquez as the previous executive directors as a volunteer and then as director of admissions at UWC ISAC Japan. And so I know that I'm stepping into a big void that I'm going to have to fill, which is intimidating in and of itself. But I'm also really grateful that they both taught me a lot about the job along the way. So while it's still early, I definitely have a lot of goals. I think there are a couple sort of larger areas that I've really seen as something that's necessary and I'm excited to get into, which is just volunteer support and management. I think we utilize our volunteers so well in terms of selections, but there's so much more that we can actually do and celebrate and kind of create a bit more of this alumni engagement piece to the volunteer management side. I think Pearson has done a phenomenal job of working with the Pearson alumni community. But when you look at Canada and the unique position that we're in that we're a very attractive destination for folks all around the world to want to live and potentially study for the rest of their lives. So we don't only have Canadian UWCers amongst us. We really have UWCers from every nationality in our country that we're not utilizing or capitalizing on. So I'm really hopeful that there's going to be some opportunities to develop some alumni fun and engagement activities that will also support volunteering and fundraising opportunities. I think too that there's a unique opportunity that we have as a national committee to influence the structure and the functionality of the national committees for the UWC movement. A huge part of that is looking at, diversity, equity, and inclusion in our selections processes, and really talking about putting things like reconciliation into action in every stage of selections and support for students, so that we're really demonstrating as Canadians that we are leading by example. And that is definitely something that I hope we're going to be able to do for a while. So feel free to stop me.
That's okay, because I was going to say that my next question was about what are the challenges that you're looking forward to, and you've pretty well answered that already by framing the challenges in terms of opportunities, which is obviously the best way for someone who's working with a number of volunteers, who's working with an organization like the National Committee, to look at it as. So let's just go a little bit into your background. You've mentioned ISAC a couple of times, a fairly recent addition to the UWC movement. What's been your involvement in the UWC universe?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll go even further back. So when I graduated from university, I started working as an admissions counselor in the rural north for the prairies predominantly. And I was teaching students all about how they could access post-secondary. And I've really found that counseling with students about the opportunities that exist and making them seem less scary has been a huge influencing factor in my career. And so I came into schools all the time where I felt like students didn't know what was out there. And eventually I graduated from the rural north and took on more international opportunities. And I ended up at a UWC and connected it to, that supervisor that I'd had way back when. So UWC Costa Rica was the first campus that I stepped foot on, and I was blown away. I had this amazing tour with some other university reps. John Carpenter was my tour guide at the time, who's still in the movement. And I left that school visit where I was there trying to recruit them to go to the University of Alberta. And I said, I want to work here one day. This is absolutely my dream. These are the kinds of people and students that I would love to work with. And I got to visit Pearson a couple of times, and it really just remained within, the kind of Americas region for me for UWC. And I ended up running into a counselor at a conference in Kenya John Storr, who's also the director of admissions and uni counselor for UWC Waterford Columba. And he told me that a job was available in Japan if I was interested. And I applied while I was working in Kenya for that job, and somehow managed to get hired. And I really didn't think that I would even get looked at, because I figured they'd only hire UWC alums, but I'm beyond grateful that it was a new school. When I joined ISAC in 2017, it was the first year that they were becoming a UWC. So I got to be a part of this identity shift. And I also got to work really closely with, sorry, hopefully, I don't know if you can hear that or not. I heard it. My inbox is binging. I got to work with Lynn Kobayashi, who is a Pearson alum, and you know, really is the definition for me of a catalyst of positive change and opening up UWC ISAC Japan to influence the education for Japanese nationals. I really think ISAC is doing something incredible. It's creating a culture shift in that nation. And I'm grateful that I got to spend 3 years there, 2017 to 2020, in a variety of roles. And I love the students. I absolutely fell in love more than I ever thought that I could. Yeah, I could go on and on about how incredibly lucky I feel to have been able to work with leaders like this, and students that are becoming those leaders.
Well, I'd like to say we had unlimited time, because you have such passion and such, you articulate it so well about what UWC means to you, and what doors and what opportunity it has meant, but also about how you're able to help other people in this regards. Because when it comes down to it, I mean, a big part of the executive director role for any national committee is probably going to be, how do I help students achieve their dreams? You know, so that's kind of appropriate, I think. Speaking of which, I mean, so what's the best way for prospective students, for their families, for alumni who might be interested in volunteering? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so Google is my best friend. You can Google UWC Canada and it will take you to our website. On that website, it'll have a contact us link right there. And it'll link you right to my email address, which is nationalcommittee@pearsoncollege.ca. It's the best way to reach me. But we also have accounts on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and you can reach me on any of those socials at any time. So yeah, please do reach out. Any questions that you have, I'm happy to support.
And I'll just note too that I was looking at my other screen here because I was bringing up the how to apply page on the Pearson College website. So we've got links there as well that will take you to application pages as well. The application period for Canadians is open right now. It opened in mid-August, I believe. And Lyndsay, how far does that period extend to?
It'll close on November 15th.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And really, I think it's important to emphasize to anyone who's interested in going to a UWC school, any of the 18 schools around the world, as a Canadian, get in there and take a look at that information now. Start your application as early as you can, because there are a number of items you'll need to collect to support your application. So any other tips to prospective students, Canadian students, Lyndsay?
Yeah, I think giving yourself time is very important. Give your recommenders time to write you a strong letter of recommendation. But I think also just really consider in your application why you want this and why it's so important. Why do we need UWC more than ever in this world, right? Research the mission, understand what we're trying to do and how you can be a part of it, because it's not just about you receiving an education, but it's also about you helping to teach your peers and your teachers alongside you. So really think about it, dig deep, don't leave it to the last second. It does take some work, but we're really looking forward to reading your applications and working with you through the selections process.
And then that's a great way to wrap it up. But Lyndsay, is there anything I've missed? Anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, I would just say that I need all of your help, please. If you know, young person in this world who would be a great fit for UWC. If you, in fact, are yourself a young person that really wants to go to UWC, don't hesitate to apply. Even the process of applying will teach you something about yourself. And I think if you've already applied and maybe it didn't work out, apply again. I think that that's a really important piece to show that you can do it again, that it might not have worked out, but you really wanted it. And I just would say, push for it and talk about it. You know, I'm sure that there are a lot of alumni that are watching this. Wear your UWC clothes, start a conversation about where you went to school. We need to be talking about this best kept secret, and we need it to not be a secret anymore. I can't say it enough that if we had more UWCers around the world, we would probably be in a lot different position, a lot more positive place. So I need you. I need your help to make the world better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite true. UWC volunteers are passionate, committed, and we just need them all to be visible. So, Lyndsay, Executive Director, National Committee of Canada, thank you very much for tolerating this interview, and thank you very much for spending a little bit of time outside. And
thank you so much for having me.
no problem. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.